Minister, thanks for your presence and for this bill. I'm old enough to remember that it was the late Seamus Brennan as Minister for Transport who introduced penalty points. And, you know, he just got, I think, tired of people pussying around the issue and people putting obstacles in the way of bringing in something kind of very pragmatic. And he just went for it, he did it, he introduced it, and it had a very dramatic impact on driving behaviour and, more importantly, on road casualties. There's just one point, really, I suppose, that I want to make before I begin some of the smaller contributions. I've become aware as a public representative, as no doubt you have, Minister in Ceann Comhairle, that people want to be consulted on things. And I think one of the things that's leading to fringe elements of protests is a frustration and anger among people who just feel they're not consulted about anything, who wake up and see dramatic infrastructural and structural changes on their roads without any kind of input or without any kind of say-so, who when they lift the phone or send an email to find out who's responsible for this never get an answer. And I think they're frustrated. I think if the public were to be consulted on this issue, they would undoubtedly say, police are not visible on our roads. The speed traps as we used to know them have all but disappeared. The presence of roads traffic police has almost vanished in parts of certainly the city. And that's no fault of the Gardaí, it's just the numbers. So we simply have to do better on that, Minister, and I know that you are very committed to that. And this legislation, when the Gardaí are equipped with it, will absolutely assist them in doing their job more effectively. But without a sufficient number of Gardaí, these changes are going to be very difficult to implement. So what do people want? Law-abiding drivers want to know that when they go out on the road, if they drive and comply with the speed limits and comply with the rules of the road and comply with directional signs, that when they see others contravening all of those things, never mind the drink driving and the drug driving, we'll come to that, but that when the small things are penalised and when the small things are dealt with by law enforcement, then it gives them an awful lot of confidence. Now, I think one of the things that can assist us in this, obviously, is the cameras, and you've talked about that. I think in the city we need a lot more cameras at junctions. I think that would save the police a lot of time, just the breaking of red lights, the breaking of amber lights. Cyclists, and I'm a cyclist, be very popular for saying this. And it is so tempting when you're a cyclist to not obey the lights because you kind of feel you're not as big a danger as a car to someone and you're not as big a danger to a car as someone, but the law applies to cyclists as much as it does to everybody else and pedestrians. And we're a country of pedestrians too who many pay very little attention to pedestrian signals too. So when drivers break lights and don't obey road signs and get away with this unpenalised, it leads to a creeping kind of breaking of the law. There's a super cycle track just constructed and under construction in Tala at the moment, and actually a man recently came to me and said, you know, my truck, which is legal, or my vehicle, which is legal and which is licensed and which is taxed, I can't drive it now along this road without actually impeding the centre white line. Does that mean, you know, he said he'd been stopped for impeding the centre white line, but his vehicle actually can't travel along the lane because it's narrowed so much. Local authorities in Knockline recently, the local authorities were asked to put traffic calming in a particular state. So they came back and said, yes, they'd put ramps in. And they put chicanes in. And it has caused, these are the things, no one asked for them, and no one was consulted about them going in, but in writing, South Dublin County Council said, we're going to put in ramps. The one thing that isn't in the bill, Minister, is residential speed limits in housing estates, because most of the complaints I get from people, most people you'll know as a constituency TD, it is in it, okay, sorry, yeah, you might, not in the briefing note I got, so look, you might come back to that in your answer, because look, as a constituency TD, most of the complaints and most of the requests I get for traffic calming measures are from within residential estates, which means it's the residents within those estates who are speeding. And it seems to be impossible, Minister, for Gardaí. I've never seen Gardaí police speeding in a housing estate. I've seen them on the secondary roads and the national primary roads, but there doesn't seem to be any mechanism, or even for them to send a note around saying, look, we've had complaints. If this continues, we're going to... It's a soft form of policing, but I think it could be an effective form of policing. I do welcome the changes in the speeds. I know there are parts of my constituency which are rural, and some of the residents would say, you know, the speed limits up here are actually faster than they are on the N81 in sections of the rural roads. So hopefully this will address this also. The enforcement piece, I say, keep coming back to that. And again, in terms of the roads policing, I echo what the previous deputy said in relation to the NTA. One of the issues about the NTA, it seems to me, is that their Bus Connect section doesn't be communicating with their cycle track section, and that just doesn't seem to be happening. And a lot of the cycle track measures in my own constituency are actually penalising those who'd use public transport, because they've narrowed the road so much, traffic is impeded, and it hasn't allowed for bus corridors that could work particularly effective in some locations. When you say roads in built-up areas, Minister, and this is my last point, does Dublin constitute a whole kind of metropolitan built-up area? No, so we're not talking about the speed limits in Dublin being reduced to 30k universally. Maybe you could just elaborate on what you have in mind there. But otherwise, I think, you know, the drugs measures, they've been mentioned, the drink driving, the penalty points. I didn't mention them, I support them, there's no point in repeating them. But I know, Minister, the public out there, they want more police. They want more police in cars with cameras, on secondary roads, on major roads, and they see that as the lack of that as a major contribution to the increase in fatalities. And this really worthwhile bill won't work as effectively as I know you want it to work without those personnel on the ground. Thanks, Councillor.
Deputy Rory.